Later that night, Simon entered the back garden for a cigarette, declaring it to be his last. Like the front garden, it was neglected. What was once beautiful, vast, plant-packed greenery was now dried up, overgrown, and run down. The fences suffered from hairline cracks, splits, and holes. The trees were the closest thing to being alive, although the branches were severely overgrown and the leaves were overwhelming, most of which had holes in them. Just outside the back door was a large pebble area with seats, a small table, a dirty bird bath, a few dying plants in large pots, and a stone path obscured by the overgrown grass that trailed down a slope and around the garden. Some broken down and dirty arbours arched over the path. After Simon went back in, a crow flew down and landed atop one of the arbours, watching Simon through the window as he sat down to eat his dinner. The dining room had a high ceiling, a dark black fireplace with a large mirror hanging above the mantel which had two portraits of Delilah and Simon, with a crack in the glass on Simon's, a desk of drawers full of records with a record player on top, a long varnished wooden dining table with 3 candelabras on it, bookshelves that were part of the wall, sliding doors leading onto a balcony overlooking the garden, and a large crystalline chandelier hanging from the centre of the ceiling. The fireplace was roaring heavily. Simon sat at the far end of the table eating his dinner: lobster, salad, toasted rolls, lemon and herb butter sauce, and fries, quenching his thirst with a large glass of red wine. The bottle sat nearby, Simon having already topped up twice. He was eating quickly in a slobbish manner, already drunk. He took a break from eating to gulp his wine before continuing to eat at a faster pace. "Don't pick out like that, Simon," said a familiar voice. Simon looked up at the other end of the table, where Delilah was sitting. He slowed down chewing, and snickered, smiling at her. She smiled back before shoving a forkful of salad and lobster into her mouth, sipping her rosé. Simon's outfit suddenly changed to more formal attire, and he felt less intoxicated. He suddenly had a cloth tucked into his collar, as did Delilah. "Sorry, darling," said Simon with a mouthful. "What was that?" said Delilah sarcastically. Simon opened his mouth to apologize again, but a bit of food dropped out, causing him to cover it with his hand and drop his fork as he laughed. Delilah rolled her eyes and took another sip of rosé. She couldn't help but also be humoured. It's not funny, Simon," she said. They both wound up erupting into laughter. Delilah calmed herself down. "Honestly, no," she said in joking anger. "I won't be putting up with this. You sleep in the cinema room tonight." "Oh, come on," said Simon. "No, I mean it. I'm not sleeping next to a drunken pig who can't handle his weight in food and alcohol." "I can handle it perfectly fine, I promise you," said Simon, doing a poor Johnny Depp impression. "I'm serious. Stop putting the drugs I'm already taking into your system," said Delilah in an American accent. They both began to laugh again. Delilah grabbed a piece of her lobster and threw it across the table at Simon. It landed on his plate, causing some of his food bits to fly off. "How can I make it up to you? I'll punch a hole in the moon," said Simon in a Canadian accent. He switched to a Dracula impression. "I'll drink the blood of a small mouse and spit it into the mouth of our newborn, blah blah blah." "Nothing you do will ever impress me again," said Delilah in her normal voice. "Oh no?" asked Simon in his normal voice. Simon slowly pushed himself and his chair out from under the table. He stood up and made his way towards the record player. "Simon?" asked Delilah suspiciously. "Simon, what are you doing?" Simon gave Delilah a sly smile. She rolled her eyes and continued to eat. Simon took out his Elephant Stone single and set the needle down, causing the overlaid sound of cymbals to blare out of the speakers. "Oh, for God's sake, Simon," said Delilah. Simon began to mime Rennie's flawless beat. He moved closer to Delilah, who put an elbow on the table and her hand to her head. As soon as Ian Brown's distinct whispering voice started speaking of the heavens and cotton clouds, Simon took Delilah by the hands and tried to get her out of the chair. "No," she demandingly declined.
No, I need to be on your level before we do any of this.
Delilah grabbed her rosy and downed what remained of it. She allowed Simon to pull her up and they began to have a hand-in-hand dance to the psychedelic dance rock. When it got to the second verse, Simon looked at Delilah, whose face was massacred like it was following the accident. Simon gasped and recoiled. With surprising levels of strength, Delilah grabbed Simon by the collar and threw him over the table, knocking 2 of the candelabras and some plates onto the ground with him. Simon slowly stood up and looked around rapidly. His outfit had returned to what it was before, and the record was no longer on the player. Other than the fire crackling, there was complete silence. Delilah, as well as her plate and glass, had disappeared. Simon's food had been replaced with a store-bought pepperoni pizza and a side of defrosted potato wedges. Simon was bewildered, confused, and paranoid. He brushed his hair back and returned to his seat, grabbing his glass of wine and downing what remained of it before topping up. Materia University during the early hours of the day. The primarily grey building and grounds were vast and beautiful, with architecture suggesting it had been standing for 100 years or more. There was a statue of the founder, Dr. William Weary, in the middle of the grounds with 6 walkways connecting around it. More recently built small parts of the campus surrounded the main building, such as the gym, additional living quarters for the students, and class buildings. Simon, formally dressed with an old brown satchel over his shoulder, walked across the grounds towards the reception. There was an office with a window-like frame for the receptionist to communicate with visitors, some lounge chairs to sit on while waiting, a low-level table with business cards for the university on it, and another door leading into a meeting room. At the office desk typing away was 68-year-old Kira Green, the sharp, rude, and snappy receptionist with a gravelly voice, a slightly malformed neck, a slender frame, bony fingers, white hair in a bun, and red thermoplastic glasses. Simon entered the reception and attempted to walk straight through without speaking to her, but she did not allow him to do so, asking if she could be of assistance. Simon tightened his eyelids shut and sighed before walking back towards the office window. Mr. Doherty is expecting me, he said awkwardly. He knows
You still have to sign in, please,
she said. Why don't you just call his office and let him know I'm here?
If you'd sign in, that'd be very helpful.
Simon sighed and agreed to do so. Kira asked for his name and identification number as a staff member. He gave them, and Kira ran them through the system.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan,
she said.
Any reason you've come in today? It's been a while.
As far as you know, yes, said Simon. He attempted to walk away before Kira stopped him again, requesting he take a visitor's badge. I work here, Simon snapped as he stopped and turned to face her.
But you don't have your staff ID, so you'll need a visitor's badge,
said Kira. Simon angrily reached into his satchel and pulled out his staff identification so Kira could see it. She nodded very slowly and continued to type on her computer. Simon shoved it back into his satchel and marched off.
You need to keep it on,
said Kira. Simon ignored her as he disappeared into the corridors of the building. In his office sat 49-year-old Frank Doherty, a tall Irish-American. Youthful and well-built for his age, he had a typical New Yorker attitude that ran simultaneously with his professional attitude towards his job. He had a fondness but growing impatience for Simon. On that day, he was dressed in a greenish-brown tweed three-piece with a white shirt and black boots. Frank's office had a varnished wooden desk with a phone, a couple of pens, a bowl of hard candies, a photograph of his cat, and a 2-tiered desk letter tray on top. The dean sat in a comfortable spinning office chair with a bookshelf and a cabinet with various awards on display. Frank was going over some paperwork before being interrupted by a knock on the door. He told the person to enter. "Hello, Simon," he said. Frank stood up and extended his arm. Simon awkwardly and clunkily shook Frank's hand before they both sat down. Simon removed his satchel and set it down beside him. "What can I help you with, Simon?" said Frank. I need more supplies, said Simon. Frank was immediately exasperated. He sighed and leaned back into his chair. I know I've been asking a lot of you, but this is the last time, said Simon. For God's sake, Simon, said Frank. I really am getting sick of this. Frank stood up and walked over to the window, peering through one of the blinds. I know, I'm asking a lot.
A lot? I'm just the goddamn dean, Simon. I love my job, believe it or not, and you are busting my balls.
It's all coming out of my pocket, Frank.
Yes, I know that, and I appreciate it strongly. But I still have a lot of shit to deal with afterwards. Making sure everyone involved stays quiet, making sure nobody upstairs or downstairs notices and starts asking questions, constantly taking anti-anxiety meds like some kind of fucking schizo because I can't stop thinking about whether this is actually going to benefit me in the long run like you promised!
I told you that I was onto something, said Simon. You promised you would have a little faith and make all the necessary sacrifices in the name of life and science. That was a promise, and I hope you intend to keep it.
I know, but it's too much, said Frank. You're being all secretive and Russian on me. For some unknown reason, maybe I am fucking crazy, but I actually thought you'd be a little more open with me and actually share, updates. You have to help me have some confidence in this, or I don't think I can keep going along with it. Don't say that!
Simon snapped.
If you do that, you're at risk of either stalling or even completely stopping one of the world's most important creations. And what might that be?
Simon fell silent and batted his eyes down. Frank sighed, looking down in disappointment.
Look, I don't get you, Simon, he said. I get it's been tough since Delilah passed. I gave you those 3 months, and then you came to me about doing this. Now I've got everyone in the department thinking you're still depressed and could off yourself at any moment.
Who's to say I still don't feel that way? Said Simon. Have you ever lost someone you loved?
Yeah, my grandmother and my auntie. Not to mention my sister. It's tough. You never get over it. But you've done nothing that suggests you couldn't come back to work. You somehow convinced me to be involved in what, I'm just going to say it, feels dark, creepy, suspicious, and a little uncertain. You've had a steady career where you've proved you understood what you were doing and that you were good at it. You're good at fixing computers and teaching shit about biology.
I did a lot more than just teach them shit, said Simon. I showed them new ways of discovering new things and improving old ones.
And yet even when you try to stand up to me like you are now, you still come across as this shy, nervous wreck. Believe me, you're the last person I ever found remotely intimidating. You're quiet, you're awkward, you've got little to no confidence. Even when you try, it just doesn't work. How can someone with your talent just be like that?
Maybe I just don't like people or care what they think about me.
That's fine, but maybe I don't fully trust a guy that can't be more open with me. Someone who, as I pay him for not being here, uses me to buy equipment and other weird things I don't really know anything about.
Simon didn't respond, and an awkward silence followed. Frank sighed and grabbed a hard candy. As he unwrapped it, Simon went into his satchel, retrieving a check and a piece of lined paper taken from a notebook. He handed it to Frank, who didn't take it immediately as he popped the candy into his mouth. He took the note from Simon and looked over it. "It's not too much, is it?" said Simon. "Inexpensive compared to the last few deliveries. After this weekend, you can come and check my progress next Saturday. All questions you have will be answered. I just need a little more time." "One more weekend," said Frank as he sucked on the candy. "And this is all you need to get to the next level? Have them there by tonight and I can start using them tomorrow." Frank sighed. He set the note down and agreed. Simon gave Frank a nod before attempting to leave. He put his hand on the door handle. "Oh, Simon," said Frank, stopping him. "Yes," said Simon. "Are you okay? You're not going, crazy from all this? There are people you can speak to. Not friends, but professionals. Don't be afraid to open up and speak to someone if you have to. Simon didn't respond. He waited a moment before opening the door and leaving the office. Frank sighed and looked at the check. It was a big number, but it was undoubtedly valid. He grabbed the phone off of the receiver and dialed. Hey, Nico, he said. Yeah, I've got another delivery. I need you to take $7,500 from the account. Then I need you to take this check here, run it down, and put it back in. Yeah, I got the list here, so listen carefully. Okay, I need a D circuit. While Frank listed off the items to his supplier, Simon walked along the high-ceiling hallway past the various doors of the classes and offices. He approached the main stairwell and ran down at high speed. He reached the bottom so quickly that he almost slammed right into someone as they entered the stairwell. Jesus, man, said the man. God, sorry, Simon froze upon realizing Jorge was the man he bumped into. They locked eyes for a moment before Simon attempted to leave. Whoa, hold on, Si, said Jorge as he tried to stop Simon. You okay? Simon very bluntly told Jorge he was fine before continuing out of the stairwell and towards the exit. Jorge thought to himself but decided against trying to speak to Simon again, walking up the stairwell to begin his day. It was a bright, sunny day with birds tweeting and a cricket or two chirping. The heat was overwhelming but gorgeous. Although still a little messy, the garden was now more organised and full of life. Simon was using a trowel to put a new plant in. Simon! A gentle voice called out. Less dishevelled, Simon looked up at the back door where Delilah stood, holding a picnic basket in one hand and 2 wine glasses in the other. Breakfast is ready, she said. A wine picnic? Said Simon. For breakfast? Why ever not? It's only a couple of sandwiches and grapes. And it's not wine, it's whims. Whims, eh? Well, alright then. Bring them here. You come here. That lawn needs cutting, so we're eating on the table. Why put it in a basket then? I thought you were finally cutting the lawn, that's why. Tut, you're so picky, Delilah. The grass is what makes it worth it. Simon threw his trowel aside and made his way towards his wife. Delilah set the basket and the glasses on the table, allowing them both to take a seat. What kind of sandwiches? Said Simon as he sat down. Just a little bit of me, said Delilah. Meaning? Delilah opened the basket, revealing a mass of flesh, blood, and internal organs, including a pulsating brain in the middle. Simon was shocked. He heard a murder of crows caw loudly and turned to look at them as they flew away at rapid speed. Blood squirted out from the brain, hitting the corner of Simon's forehead. Delilah, her face now destroyed like it was after the accident, let out a haunting, ear-piercing scream until Simon's eardrums ruptured and bled. Having fallen asleep on the stairs of the cellar, Simon shot up from the nightmare, once again dishevelled, alone, and tired. He could still feel the pain in his ears. They rang for 50 seconds or more before he could finally hear again. He took another moment to compose himself before getting up and walking over to his creation, no longer covered by the sheet. What took up a good portion of the cellar was a bizarre, immoral, highly dangerous experiment. It was a large techno-organic machine composed of computer and television monitors, speakers, wires, radio parts, smart meters, and partly exposed circuitry. The centre of it was a control deck surmounted by an array of panels. Across the top ran a row of winking monitor lights of varying colours. A microphone was embedded into the machine, and a device like the mouth of a letterbox behind it used as a feeding mechanism, the inside composed of flesh, wires, and circuitry. A printout element like an automatic typewriter was attached to the machine. Underneath was a severely damaged brain with some spinal columns and metal pins attached to it in a formaldehyde jar, connected to the core of the machine via a tube. Various wires connected to the pins, extending through wire-sized holes attached to cables also connected to the core, and various other organs in jars, such as a heart, lungs, liver, and kidneys. Simon sat before the machine in an old spinning stool bolted to the ground. He pressed the main power button to turn it on and flicked several switches. The main monitor showed green lines like the ones found on a heart monitor. The pattern and flash level were sporadic and random, being altered by Simon tuning a radio-like dial, whirring, buzzing, and static going off as he did so. It eventually toned down into a quiet humming, and the green lines turned to faint static. The liquid inside the brain jar started to bubble and the brain pulsated, with the wires sending out brain signals to the computer while the machine powered the brain, creating an everlasting cycle of techno-organic life. Simon continued to tune the machine until the screen became black with a faint glow of white. He started using the large keyboard along the desk to type things into the computer, giving it commands. He opened up a compartment in one of the computers, grabbed a screwdriver from a toolbox underneath the desk, and twisted a screw in more firmly. He put the screwdriver aside, grabbed a pair of needle-nose pliers, and wiggled a few things about. The image on the monitor became brighter and the computer began to type something on its own. We're going to begin a verbal speaking exercise tonight, said Simon into the microphone. Do you feel as though you're ready? The computer typed again. We're going to fix that. The sound of the buzzer from upstairs in the hallway went off, causing Simon to lower his head and sigh. I'll be back shortly, he said. Take your time to carefully power up completely. Simon jumped up and ran up the stairs. The computer typed again and glitched as it did so. Simon closed the cellar door and locked it. He walked over to the buzzer as it quickly went off again 5 more times. Frustrated, he held the button down. "Who is it?" he snapped.
"I come bearing gifts, Mr. Morgan,"
said a creepy voice through the speaker. Simon rolled his eyes before telling the person to come in and buzzing the gate open. He went to the front door and opened it, watching a white pickup truck go up the driveway to the garage door. Once it parked and turned off, a young-looking man stepped out and walked around to the back of the truck. He gestured for Simon to come over. Simon looked at the elderly driver who was staring forward with crossed arms. He slowly walked over to meet the younger man. 27-year-old Todd Gilbertson, a tall, dark-haired, skinny, sunken-eyed weirdo with a morbid curiosity for dead things, was the younger man in question. Dressed in all black, he vaguely resembled Dr. Caligari from the silent horror film. His voice was unusual, flamboyant, and reeked of insincerity. Although he looked weak, he was quite strong. The older man in the driver's seat was Todd's 60-year-old uncle, appropriately nicknamed Uncle, an old, overweight, bearded, selectively mute man who drove Todd around without question, unaware and not caring about what was going on around him. "Everything you need is in here, Mr. Morgan," said Todd. "Do you need help taking it inside?" Simon nodded. He grabbed a bag full of equipment and Todd took 2 others. They made their way towards the house and entered, Todd closing the front doors. The 2 of them carried the bags into the cellar. After setting them down, Todd admired Simon's creation. "It's improved since I last saw it," he said. "Why is it speaking gibberish?"
Simon was confused, asking Todd what he meant. He looked at the screen to see that various letters, numbers, and symbols were being self-typed, fluctuating between slow and rapid speed. Simon rushed over to the desk and knelt down. The brain was pulsating rapidly and the liquid was more bubbly. He grabbed a spanner from inside the toolbox and loosened one of the bolts, releasing pressure and stabilizing the machine. "Pass me the depressurization attachment," Simon ordered. Todd rummaged through two of the bags and successfully pulled the small device out of the second one. He handed it to Simon, who carefully connected it to the brain, no longer having to depressurize it manually. "That'll certainly make things a lot easier," said Todd. Simon ignored Todd so he could type things into the computer. He spoke into the microphone again. "I'm going to put you into a temporary mode of none-feeling so we can operate on you, okay?" he said. "You'll want to be conscious so we can transition to speaking seamlessly." The computer typed. Simon nodded before tampering with the switches and buttons. He turned to Todd and looked at him for all but half a second before going through the bags. He pulled out a circuit and a jar of blank flesh. He set them down on the desk before pulling out more circuitry, some wires, a tin container, and a very expensive printer. "It's interesting to see how far this project is coming along," said Todd. "It intrigues an ignorant mind such as myself to see such a great mind at work." Still ignoring Todd, Simon opened up the tin, revealing an artificially enlarged voice box with some advanced technological attachments and wires in the tin with it.
Simon very carefully connected it inside the computer before he started typing something into it, which prompted it to type back. It started typing out every word beginning with the letter A, while Simon carefully used the dial, switches, and buttons to shift the frequency of the computer's thoughts from typed to verbal.
Random. Ability. Able.
The machine spoke with a robotic feminine voice.
Aboard. Abroad.
"Wow," said
Absence.
Todd. "It's remarkable, Dr. Morgan. Truly." Simon once again ignored Todd, who quietly admired Simon's work with a blank face. While the computer went on in the background, Simon took a seat and opened the jar of blank flesh. On the other side of the neighbourhood, Jorge and his wife Kathy were hosting their party. Kathy was 37, Danish, and an installation manager and educator at the university. A friendly woman with blonde hair, pale grey eyes, sharp red nails, and tall legs, she was always dressed in loose-fitting, wavy skirt dresses and bright dress shoes when not working, and always in a three-piece with a shirt and boots when working. Jorge's lounge was large enough for a gathering of at least 20 or more. The room was composed of a grey couch, carpeted floor, 3 brown armchairs, a chestnut brown coffee table, a traditional cast iron fireplace with a white marble mantel and a golden framed mirror hanging above it, bookshelves, a couple of oak wooden steps leading up to a piano and 2 patio doors with silk curtains, and an open doorway with a couple of steps leading into the main hallway. All 13 guests in total seemed to be having a good time. They were indulging in cremant, with various bottles sitting in metal buckets with ice to keep them cool. Jorge, holding a glass himself, entered the lounge and approached Kathy, who was sitting on an armchair talking to her friend Thomas. "Hello, Thomas," said Jorge as he delivered a pat on his friend's shoulder. "Jorge, didn't you say Simon Morgan might be coming tonight?" said Thomas. I tried, I really did." "You went to his house, didn't you?" said Emma, interjecting. "Was he alright?" "You said he seemed odd, but not as bad as you thought," said Kathy. "He didn't seem too bad," said Jorge. "He was a little manic and awkward. No more awkward than he has been before."
Oh God, do you remember that time he offered Lionel a breaded prawn that he found on the floor? Asked Kathy's friend Jessie. He didn't, that was a misunderstanding. Jamie had given it to him and told him Lionel liked prawns, so he tried giving it to Lionel. I think he's alright, said the aforementioned Jamie. Just needs to come out of his shell a little. Listen to yous lot, said Michael, Kathy and Jorge's Scottish friend. That's terrible, that. A man's wife dies and you're all sitting here chatting about him as if he's just the next Daily Mail gossip victim. My Betty died, I'd probably be as bad as he is right now. He's wanting to stay up in that nice house of his. You let him. How is Betty? Said Jessie. Fine. She's back up in Aberdeen visiting her parents. Michael turned to another guest and whispered, He's hoping they kick the bloody bucket and stop their long-distance calling every 2 hours. Darling, you tried your best, said Kathy to Jorge. I think we just need to give him some more time. I'm sure whatever he's doing up in that house of his is so much more fun to him than this would be. It's his way of mourning. I know, I feel useless as a friend. Well, the less someone else cares, the more you do. Jorge smiled a little. Kathy cheered him with her glass and encouraged everyone to do the same. Within Simon's cellar, the computer was still going through the entirety of the English language from A to Z, well into the middle of its A's. Simon finished up attaching some of the blank flesh to a circuit. Once he completed the task, he carefully inserted the circuit into the machine and sealed it. A buzzing noise went off. The computer stopped speaking for a moment as it had a mini reboot before continuing. While this all happened, Todd creepily stood there staring at Simon and his machine, admiring every single piece of it. You're making it more human, said Todd. Fascinating. I notice you've used brain-powered disability aids, yes? That's correct, Todd, Simon mumbled. What have you done to make them work? You can leave now, Todd. Todd was taken aback by this. Simon did not even turn around to acknowledge him, using some of the tools to finish up carefully attaching the printer to the machine and altering it into a processor. Todd smirked. Of course, Dr. Morgan, he said. I'll report back to Professor Doherty that we've made excellent progress. I'll call him myself, said Simon. Tell him that and nothing else. Yes, Dr. Morgan. Good night. Like a skinny vampire's shadow on the wall, Todd creepily made his way towards the stairs and exited the cellar. Simon remained intently focused on his work as the computer continued to speak.
Apparent. Apparently. Appeal. Appear. Appearance. Appetite. Apple. Application. Apply. Appointment.
Simon took a break from working on the processor to bend down and tamper with the brain. He did something that caused the computer to stop for a second before making whirring sounds. When it resumed, it was speaking a lot faster.
Appreciate. Approach. Appropriate. Approval. Approve. Approximate. April. Aquifer. Arbitrary. Arch. Architect. Area. Arena. Argue. Argument. On. Armpit. Army. Around.
Todd, without saying a word, took a seat in the passenger side of Uncle's truck and slammed the door shut. Uncle turned the key in the ignition and promptly left the property. Todd stared at the house the whole time, not even batting his eyes or blinking once throughout the whole journey home. Once the uncle-nephew duo arrived, Todd quickly jumped out of the truck and ran straight into the camper van that he, Uncle, and his mother lived in. "Why are you in such a rush?" barked a raspy old female's voice. "Nothing," said Todd as he ran into the sleeping section and threw himself onto his bed. "Where's Uncle?" "He'll be in soon." The disturbing voice belonged to Todd's mother, Abigail. She was 49 but looked 78, having destroyed her voice, mind and body with years of excessive alcoholism and nicotine addiction.
She always sat in the booth without so much as stretching her legs most days, yelling in her son's direction. She only ever ate spaghetti hoops from a tin warmed up in a Little Miss and Mr. Men bowl in the microwave. Her eyes were sunken, her skin was wrinkly, her hair was grey and strawish. She wore the same black dress, olive green shawl and cheap rings, and her nails were concerningly sharp and long like a wolf's claws. Todd tried to ignore his mother's wheezing as he lay down, tapped his thumbs together, and stared at the ceiling. His mind raced with ideas. He wanted to know more about the machine. He wanted to constantly be under Simon's wing and learn to do the things he had done during his months of mourning. He craved the information in Simon's brain, fantasizing about eating it to obtain all its knowledge. If only it were that simple, he thought to himself. Then his mind slipped into the coroner's report he requested and read in regards to Delilah's death. He remembered the graphic detail in which they had written about her mangled face, mushed up brain, cracked open skull, and soupish eyeballs. He began to feel the blood racing to the lower part of his body and cradled his groin. Before he had a chance to satisfy himself, Uncle burst into the trailer, slammed the door shut behind him and grabbed a 9% beer from the fridge,
causing an irritated Todd to slam his fist against his bed.
"Pipe down,"
hissed Abigail.
"Pipe it down, pipe it down, pipe it down. Pipe it down."
Uncle belched like a Gila monster before taking a seat opposite his sister, staring at the table the entire time to avoid making eye contact.